The Getaway is a game that I've been playing for decades. I can remember walking into GameStop and trading in almost all of my Nintendo 64 games just to buy The Getaway. In hindsight, not the best idea, but that's just how bad I wanted this game as a child. The cover art drew me in with its black and white filter and distressed yellow logo. I was obsessed with GTA 3 around this time, and so seeing a similar game set outside of America intrigued me. I've always been a huge fan of gangster movies. My parents were very open with letting me watch these as a child. Movies like Scarface, Goodfellas, The Godfather, etc. And so, naturally I was drawn to games like The Getaway. And since I've been playing The Getaway for so long, I thought that I would go back and play it for this channel. Has it aged as well as I think it has, or has nostalgia simply been blinding me from seeing what's right in front of me? Well, by the end of today's video, I hope to find out which one it is. So kick back, relax, and join me on a trip down memory lane. This is The Getaway.
I don't want you on. I want my kid back.
The Getaway was released on January 19th, 2003, exclusively for PlayStation 2. The Getaway follows the perspective of two different protagonists over the course of a single day. For the first half of the game, you play as Mark Hammond. Mark Hammond is a former member of the Collins gang, who was recently released from prison and is trying to set his life straight. While Mark is laying in bed, his wife and child are ambushed by three unknown assailants. In the struggle that ensues, Mark's wife Susie is accidentally shot and killed, and his child Alex kidnapped. As Mark, you frantically chase these people down and you're led to a warehouse where you're also kidnapped. The perpetrator? Charlie Jolson. Charlie is the leader of the Bethnal Green mob, and while his motives are unclear at the start of the game, they become more apparent as the story plays out. Charlie Jolson has you performing all kinds of high-risk behavior like shooting up rival nightclubs and restaurants, or freeing his nephew Jake Jolson in a prison break. If Mark refuses, Alex is dead, and likely Mark too. Throughout Mark's story, you see glimpses of the Getaway's second protagonist, Frank Carter. Frank Carter is a member of the police and has been trying to take down the Jolsons for a while now. For the entirety of the second half of the game, you play as Frank. Each character's story directly intertwines with each other, not in a way where you're seeing the same cutscenes again and again, but in a way where they're presented from different perspectives or with added context. Frank is one of the few policemen who believe that Mark is being used for Charlie's insidious plan, and so he's willing to go out of his way to help him. I quite like this from a storytelling perspective. I liked seeing the added bits of context that clear up Mark's side of the story, but that's ultimately the issue with this way of structuring the game. This is Mark's story, this is Mark's struggle and Mark's redemption. Frank is merely an outsider, someone who's there to assist Mark, to help Mark undertake this monumental task. When I played through the game as Frank, I felt nothing. There was no emotional attachment to the character like there was with Mark. At one point in the story, Frank gets put on leave from the force, and I think we're supposed to feel bad for the guy, but I just don't. There's no build-up to Frank's character. We don't know this guy. We've seen Mark go through this horrific experience and then take on Charlie's tasks at gunpoint to save his boy. Frank, on the other hand, is risking nothing other than his job and maybe his reputation. There's more to it than this for sure, but I never could quite get over that while playing as Frank. It never felt like there was any sort of real risk to myself or others. At this point, we already know what happens in the ending too, what happens to Mark, Alex, Charlie, and his henchmen, so there's no sense of discovery or wonder. I think I would have preferred to have only played as Mark and have that segment of the game be longer. Whenever I replay this game, I tend to stop once I beat Mark's section, and that's for good reason. Not only from a story perspective, but also a gameplay one. Changing gears just a bit, The Getaway is a third-person shooter with a very ambitious vision. There's no HUD whatsoever in anything you do in The Getaway. Everything is shown to you, the player, through in-game methods, like changing textures or sound cues. For example, your health is shown on your body. As you take more damage, you'll see bloodstains start to appear, and you'll also move slower as you're more hurt. Your body will also sway more, and you'll be more inaccurate with your shots. My only issue with this is that I genuinely had no idea where the limit to my health was. I had a pretty good idea considering you're practically immobile when you're critically injured, and The Getaway does feature regenerating health, so it's not like you're stuck stumbling through an entire mission like this. But to regenerate that health, you have to lean against walls and take a breather. Yeah, I'm not joking. It's silly if you really analyze it, but if you suspend your disbelief for just a bit, it's just another facet to that commitment to an immersive no HUD experience. The Getaway features a cover system that I found to unfortunately be mostly useless. A lot of the time, if I popped out of cover and went to target an enemy, Mark would simply shoot the wall in front of him rather than around the wall to hit the target I was locked onto. If the game had a visual preview of where your shot is going to land, I don't believe this would have been an issue. The There's also a free aim option, but again, I only used this when I wanted to target explosive barrels or if the lock-on was unable to hit the target. There are pros and cons to not having a traditional HUD, but I appreciate the lengths the developers went to commit to this. Speaking of combat a bit more, in the Getaway you're able to use 3 different weapons. It doesn't seem like a lot, but they all have their own purpose. The starter pistol is the most accurate at range, and you're also able to pick up a second one and dual wield these. Next up, you're able to pick up a pump shotgun, which is excellent for clearing out narrow hallways and other small spaces. I love how it sounds and how it ragdolls enemies. Lastly, you have the AK, which excels at crowd control. There are times where 5 or more enemies will be running towards you at once, and so the AK is the only gun I really want in this instance. Yeah, so in the Getaway there are no reloads outside of the pistol. Once you run out of ammo, you drop it and move on to the next weapon you can find on the ground. It sounds crazy, but hear me out. It turns the Getaway into more of a tactical shooter when you think about it. I almost always entered a new area with pistols drawn, scanning the area for targets. If I knew I was going into a building, I'd grab something with a bit more firepower off the ground and selectively take my shots on targets I could realistically hit at that range. Anytime in the Getaway when you're not on foot, you're in a vehicle, and the game features plenty of licensed cars from real manufacturers like Lexus, BMW, Mercedes, and more. I also love all of the ads around London from real-life brands, and sometimes even competing brands like Burger King, McDonald's, and KFC, for example. It makes London seem more lifelike, and that's the kind of in-game advertising I will always support. Getting back to the driving itself, each car feels different, with different handling models, rates of acceleration, top speeds, braking distances, etc. The thing is, every car feels extremely twitchy to handle, and you will spin out often if you do not slow down considerably for corners. It takes a bit of getting used to, but I did quite enjoy it. It's different and something I haven't really seen in any other title since. The driving falls off for me when it comes to car-on-car contact. The game will frequently bug out when 2 cars are rubbing on each other. I also hated when someone hooked my back end. They'd spin me out so easily and take me down. Some might say it's realistic or whatever, but I just thought it was annoying, especially when you have multiple cars chasing you through busy downtown London. Another thing that bothered me regarding the driving was the way the AI drivers reacted to you. For many of the missions, you're on a time limit to get from point A to point B, and so any sort of delay is going to be potentially mission ending. In the Getaway, when you hit an NPC vehicle, they hold their brakes and make it extremely difficult for you to continue on. I assume they want you to back up and drive around them, but again, being on a time limit, it caused me to fail countless times. Though if I had to narrow it down to the single biggest issue I have with the driving sequences, it goes back to having no HUD. In a typical driving game, you have a map at minimum. You might also have a mini-map with markers all over it, or even a GPS system that tells you exactly where to go. The Getaway has none of this, and instead you're entirely reliant on the blinkers of your car. Unfortunately though, the blinkers do not correspond to the exact road you need to turn down, so you'll often be driving the wrong way down one-ways or driving into a tunnel that leads somewhere entirely different to where you need to go. It's pure trial and error. After a while, you'll realize you don't need to turn exactly when the blinker starts blinking, and the sooner you realize that, the better. Another issue I have with this system is when the rear end of your car takes damage, your blinkers can be smashed out and now you have no idea of where you're headed. So now you have to stop, get out of your car, shoot whoever is tailing you, then get a new car and continue on. If this happens to you in a timed mission, good luck. Your run is probably over, and I'd say you need to just restart the mission from scratch. And speaking of restarting missions, the Getaway has a very conservative checkpoint system. What I mean by this is that each mission is divided up by its gameplay segments, and only after completing a segment will you get a checkpoint. For example, a mission might have you drive somewhere, then shoot up a place, then escape by car. Each of those are one segment. It doesn't matter how far you have to drive or how many guys you have to shoot, each one is a segment. It can be really frustrating to clear out almost an entire warehouse full of guys, then get ambushed late into the segment and then have to restart from the beginning. The most egregious offender, however, are the stealth segments, the 4 stealth ones in particular. Earlier I complained about Frank Carter's half of the game, and that's because if you're not blindly shooting your way through a crack house, you're sneaking through one of Charlie's warehouses. Again and again and again. It's frustrating as hell to have a guy turn on you at the last second, and even though you made 0 noise, you're now detected and have to restart that entire segment. What's even worse is that the Getaway doesn't have independent camera control with the right stick, so you have to stick yourself to pieces of cover and hope that the camera pivots to the direction you need it to. This isn't an issue in combat since you're able to switch targets on the fly with the lock on, but in stealth you're not really targeting anybody. You're just trying to get by and avoid detection. I have other issues with the Getaway, but they're all relatively minor compared to the ones I've discussed today. I could complain that the game is too short at just 10 hours on my playthrough, or that the free roam mode really has nothing to do outside of finding hidden cars, because it doesn't, but I'd rather not get into all that today. Earlier on in the video, I asked if The Getaway has aged as well as I think it has, or has nostalgia simply been blinding me from seeing what's right in front of me? After playing it for this video, it's a mix of both. I really enjoy the story. It's a tragic tale of a former gangster trying to do right by his family, being sucked back into the criminal underworld by some psychopath. The motion capture is excellent, characters are expressive, the world is detailed and fun to drive around in, but that comes with its own issues. The blinker navigation is frustrating. I didn't like Frank Carter's half of the game, or even Frank Carter himself. The Getaway certainly shows its age, and that's to be expected now that it's 2 decades old. But do I recommend the game as is? Honestly, if you're a fan of gangster flicks or GTA style games like I am, I say check it out, but go into it patiently, take your time, and methodically move through levels. The Getaway is definitely a game that rewards patient gameplay. Next week I plan on checking out the sequel, The Getaway Black Monday, which fixed a lot of the issues I had with the first game, but also introduced its own set of problems. Get subscribed if you'd like to see that one as well. For today's end of video question, I'm asking you guys what your favorite GTA style game is. It can be any platform, any series. I would love to read your responses. These are some of my favorite games of all time, so I'm always on the lookout for ones I may have missed. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good one.